I've spent years swallowing the truth like broken glass, feeling it cut deeper every time it went down, shredding my insides until I could barely breathe. But tonight, I can't hold it in anymore. The one person everyone in my family calls the glue, the one they thank for keeping us together. She's been bleeding us dry. And I'm the one who's been stitching the wounds in secret, night after night, while they all slept soundly. My name is Sophia. I've been married to Marcus for 9 years now. From the very first family dinner after our wedding, sitting in that stuffy dining room with the faded floral wallpaper and the scent of overcooked brisket hanging in the air, I knew exactly where I stood. Across the table sat Clara, Marcus's sister, with her effortless waves of auburn hair and that laugh that echoed like wind chimes, making everyone lean in closer. And then there was Vivian, his mother, her eyes lighting up like she'd just won the lottery every time Clara spoke. Vivian would lean over, pat Clara's hand with those arthritic fingers, and declare in that unwavering tone, "Clara's the heart of this family." Without her, we'd all just drift apart like leaves in the wind. I'd sit there, forcing a smile that felt like it was carved from stone, passing the roast or refilling water glasses, my hands trembling just a little under the table. Marcus would catch my eye, squeeze my knee in that silent apology of his, but he never said a word out loud. He hated rocking the boat, always had. Conflict made him shrink, like he was still that little boy afraid of his mother's sharp tongue. So I learned to live with it, biting back the words that burned in my throat. I cooked the elaborate holiday meals, spending hours chopping vegetables until my fingers ached, organized the chaotic birthdays with balloons and cakes that no one else bothered to plan, and showed up without fail when Vivian's pipes burst in the dead of winter, or when Clara needed someone to watch her yappy little terrier while she jetted off on yet another girls' trip to some sun-soaked resort. I did it all quietly, because that's who I am. I fix things. I hold things together when the world starts to unravel. But no one ever saw it, no one wanted to. To them, it was always Clara's magic, her invisible touch, keeping the family close-knit and warm. If I resolved a crisis, like the time Vivian's car broke down and I arranged the tow and the repairs, she'd somehow twist it back to Clara. Oh, Clara mentioned a good mechanic once. She's always thinking ahead for us. It stung like salt in a fresh cut, but I told myself I didn't need the credit. I had Marcus. I had our quiet life in our modest 2-bedroom apartment, with its creaky floors and the faint scent of coffee always lingering in the kitchen. That was enough to keep me going, or so I thought. But that wasn't the worst of it. The unease started creeping in like fog rolling off a cold lake, subtle at first, but thickening with every passing week. Vivian's comments at dinners began shifting, less about family unity and more about little worries. "Money's a bit tighter these days," she'd say, her voice laced with that forced cheerfulness, waving it off with a hand that trembled more than it used to. Clara would nod sympathetically, her manicured nails tapping the table, complaining about how her latest spa appointment got canceled because things are just so unpredictable right now. I'd listen, my fork hovering over my plate, sensing the undercurrent, but not yet seeing the storm brewing beneath. Marcus noticed it too. His shoulders would tense during those meals, his usual easy smile fading into something strained. But he brushed it off when I asked, saying, "Mom's just getting older. It'll pass." I wanted to believe him, but something gnawed at me, a quiet instinct that whispered this was more than age or bad luck. Then came the clue that made my skin crawl. One Sunday afternoon, as we were clearing the table after brunch, plates clinking softly, the remnants of eggs and bacon cooling in the air, I overheard Vivian on the phone in the next room. Her voice was low, urgent. "Clara, darling, about that loan. I trust you, but the bank called again. Just make sure it's sorted soon." She hung up quickly when she heard me approaching, plastering on that familiar smile. "Just chatting with Clara. She's so busy these days, helping everyone out." I nodded, but my mind raced. "Loan? What loan?" Marcus shrugged it off later, but I couldn't shake the chill. A few months ago, the cracks finally splintered wide open. Vivian began dropping heavier hints, her eyes darting nervously as she spoke. Clara wanted to help a friend open that little boutique downtown, she'd say with a proud little smile that didn't reach her eyes. Such a generous heart, always investing in people. But then the calls started, Marcus's phone buzzing late at night, pulling him from sleep with a groan. I'd lie there in the dark, sheets tangled around me, listening to his side of the conversation. Mom, slow down. How much? We'll figure something out. When he'd hang up, his face would be ashen, the lines around his eyes deeper. One night, after another one of those calls, he slumped into the kitchen chair, the fluorescent light casting harsh shadows on his face. Clara borrowed almost 30 grand from Mom over the last 2 years, he said, his voice hollow, like the words were dragged from him. The boutique failed spectacularly. Bad location, no customers. Mom's credit cards are maxed out trying to cover it. She's behind on the house payments, utilities piling up. He rubbed his temples, the weight of it all pressing down like an invisible hand. I felt something cold and heavy settle in my chest, like a stone sinking into dark water. 30 grand. Gone. Vanished into thin air. And Clara? She was still posting those glossy photos on social media. Spa weekends with bubbling champagne, new designer purses dangling. From her arm, cocktails at sunset with captions like, "Living my best life." Not a single word about repayment. Not a hint of remorse. Marcus looked at me across the table, his eyes pleading. What do we do, Sophia? We can't just ignore this. I took a deep breath, the kitchen clock ticking loudly in the silence. The truth was, we were already stretched razor thin. Our mortgage eating up half our paychecks, groceries climbing every month, that tiny savings account we were desperately trying to build for emergencies or maybe, someday, a family of our own. Handing over cash wasn't an option. But letting Vivian lose the house she'd called home for 40 years? The one filled with faded photos of Marcus as a kid, the backyard where we'd had barbecues under string lights? I couldn't stomach that either. So I did what I always do, I stepped in. Quietly. Without fanfare. But that wasn't the worst of it. I started small, pulling Vivian's financial statements that Marcus had access to from years ago when he'd helped with her taxes. I pored over them late into the night, the blue glow of my laptop screen the only light in our dim living room, a cup of cold tea forgotten beside me. The picture that emerged was grim. Late fees stacking like bricks, interest rates soaring like unchecked flames, utilities with red warnings stamped across the bills. Her savings? Depleted. Credit score? Plummeting. I spent nights after work on the phone, my voice steady despite the exhaustion clawing at me. I negotiated with creditors, haggling down interest rates from predatory highs to something manageable. I found senior assistance programs buried in government websites, refinanced what I could without needing her signature on new forms. I even dipped into our meager savings to pay a financial advisor, a sharp-eyed woman named Elena who specialized in elder debt, to handle the trickier consolidations. All of it, I did without telling Vivian a soul. Because if she knew it was me, the quiet daughter-in-law she barely acknowledged beyond a polite nod, she'd reject the help out of sheer pride. Or worse, she'd somehow attribute it all to Clara. Oh, Clara must have inspired you with one of her ideas. She's always so forward-thinking. Every family dinner during those weeks was torture. The table laden with food I'd helped prepare, roasted chicken with herbs I'd chopped, salads I'd tossed, while Vivian still glowed whenever Clara's name surfaced. Clara's been such a comfort to me lately, she'd say, her eyes shining with that unwavering adoration, the scent of her floral perfume mixing with the meal. Always knows just how to lift my spirits with her calls and visits. And Clara would flash that perfect, practiced smile, like she deserved every syllable of praise, her laughter tinkling like crystal. I'd sit there, my jaw clenched so tight it ached, knowing I'd just spent 3 grueling hours on hold with a credit card company, listening to tinny hold music that looped endlessly, all to keep Vivian's lights from flickering off. My hands would grip the napkin in my lap, twisting it until the fabric frayed. Marcus would glance at me, his foot nudging mine under the table in silent support, but he stayed quiet. Always quiet. I told myself to endure it. The truth would surface eventually. Actions speak louder than words, right? One day, Vivian would see who was truly keeping the ship afloat. The pressure built like a storm gathering on the horizon, dark clouds swelling until they blocked out the sun. More calls from Vivian, desperate now, her voice cracking over the line. Marcus, just a little help this month. Clara's promised to sort it, but Marcus would relay it to me afterward, his face etched with guilt, pacing our narrow hallway like a caged animal. Conflicts piled up, another bill overdue, a collection notice in the mail that Vivian hid until it couldn't be ignored. Betrayals stacked like cards in a house ready to topple. Clara's empty promises. Vivian's denial. My silent sacrifices. Every 60 seconds or so in those tense evenings at home, I'd feel another mini cliffhanger hit. What if Vivian found out? What if Clara kept taking? What if we couldn't hold on? I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning lazily, my mind racing through scenarios. Marcus would roll over, murmur, "We're in this together," but his words felt thin against the mounting dread. I reached my breaking point one rainy Tuesday. Short breaths, tight chest, raw edges fraying. I slammed the phone down after another fruitless call with a bank, tears burning my eyes. Enough. Something had to give. 2 weeks ago, Elena, the advisor, called me back. Her voice was careful, measured, like she was handling fragile glass. "Sophia, there's something you need to see in these latest statements." She emailed them over, and I opened the file with shaking fingers, the rain pattering against the window like accusatory taps. Small transfers. Insidious. $400 here, $650 there, slipping from Vivian's checking account into one labeled C. Ellis. Clara's account. Every single month. For over a year. Not loans Vivian approved. Not gifts discussed over tea. Just taken. Stolen in the shadows. Clara hadn't just borrowed and failed to repay. She'd been actively sabotaging, draining the well while Vivian praised her as the family's unshakable rock. All those nights I'd lost sleep, my eyes bleary from screens and spreadsheets, trying to rebuild what was crumbling, and Clara had been the one wielding the hammer. I sat at the kitchen table, the screen blurring as hot tears welled. The betrayal hit like a gut punch, sharp, nauseating. Marcus came home, saw my face pale under the harsh light, and froze. What happened? I showed him the evidence, page after damning page. He went pale, then red with fury. "This ends now," he said, his voice low and trembling. "We have to tell Mom." For once, he didn't hesitate. No more silence. I scheduled the meeting for the next afternoon at Vivian's house, the air thick with the scent of her chamomile tea steeping on the stove. Clara showed up 20 minutes late, breezing through the door with air kisses and excuses, her perfume cloying and sweet. Vivian fussed over the cups, her hands unsteady, oblivious to the bomb about to drop. We sat in the living room, sunlight filtering through lace curtains, casting patterns like fractured glass on the carpet. I laid the folder on the scarred coffee table. Bank statements, transfer records, everything meticulously highlighted in yellow. "This is the full truth," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Vivian's hands shook as she opened it, her knuckles white. Clara laughed at first, nervous, sharp, like a blade scraping bone. "This is insane. Sophia's just jealous. She's always been second fiddle, trying to—" "Stop," I cut in. "Calm. Quiet. Deadly. This isn't about jealousy. This is about the truth you've hidden." I walked Vivian through it, line by line. Every illicit transfer. Every lie layered on top. How I'd spent months, sleepless, relentless, rebuilding her finances from the brink. Negotiating with faceless voices on phones, scraping together plans to avert foreclosure, bankruptcy. All without a whisper of recognition. All while Clara siphoned more. Vivian's face crumpled, page after page, her breath hitching like sobs caught in her throat. Clara tried to interrupt, to deflect with tears and accusations, but the cold, hard numbers didn't bend. They didn't lie. When Vivian finally looked up at her daughter, it wasn't with the fire of anger. It was worse, far worse. It was disappointment, deep and bone-weary, etching new lines into her face. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice breaking like fragile china. Clara grabbed her bag, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood as she stormed out. The door slammed so hard the windows rattled, echoing like a final punctuation. The silence that followed was deafening, thick enough to choke on. Vivian turned to me, tears carving wet paths down her cheeks, her eyes raw and exposed. "Sophia, I've been so blind. All these years, I kept saying Clara was the one holding us together. The peacemaker, the light. But it was you. It was always you in the quiet, doing the real work." She reached for my hand across the table. Hers was cold, trembling like a leaf in the wind. "I don't know how to fix what I've done to you," she said, her voice cracking. "But I see you now. Truly see you. And I'm so sorry." I didn't cry. Not in that moment. I just nodded, the weight lifting slightly from my chest. Because after all the years of being invisible, overlooked like a shadow in the corner, her words didn't magically heal the scars. But they did something profound. They set me free from the need to prove myself. Since that shattering day, things have shifted. Slowly, painfully, like bones knitting back together. Vivian started showing up differently, small things at first, like calling to ask my opinion on a recipe, or thanking me for the groceries I dropped off without being asked. She's learning to manage her own money now, attending the financial workshops I found for her, her notebook filled with careful notes. Clara hasn't been around much, her absence a gaping hole that's strangely relieving. I don't expect an apology from her. Some people can't face the mirror without shattering it. But the family feels lighter now. More real, like we're finally seeing each other without the haze of illusions. Dinners are quieter, but warmer. Conversations flowing without the undercurrent of favoritism. Marcus holds my hand tighter these days, his pride shining in his eyes when he looks at me. And me? I don't need anyone's pedestal anymore. I know my worth, have known it deep down for years, even when the world tried to convince me otherwise. I just waited, patient as stone, for the rest of them to catch up. If you've ever been the one holding everything together in silence, fixing the breaks while someone else soaked up the praise, if you've ever poured your soul into mending what's broken, only to be overlooked time and again, tell me in the comments, would you have waited as long as I did to reveal the truth? Or would you have walked away sooner, leaving them to face the fallout alone? Because sometimes the quiet ones aren't weak at all. We're just waiting for the truth to roar loud enough that no one can ignore it anymore.